So, OK, the Northern Ireland Protocol and the Windsor Agreement, as it's now called, the Prime Minister, the result is he is now in Belfast. He's got to sell this Brexit deal. He calls it a decisive breakthrough.
Well, the historic agreement between the UK and the EU includes customs-free trade for goods travelling to Northern Ireland from Great Britain and a so-called Stormont break, which will allow the Assembly in Northern Ireland to veto some EU laws.
Well, that's if they ever get back to...
power sharing.
Yeah. The Prime Minister will now attempt to gain the support of unionists. The Democratic Unionist Party says there has been significant progress, but they warn that key issues of concern actually remain. So let's go to our political analyst on all this, Leon Emirali. Leon, what do you make of what you hear? There's very little criticism to all of this.
I think it's really good news for Rishi Sunak from the offset. I mean, he's done something that Boris Johnson tried and couldn't do. He's effectively seen off the challenge of Boris Johnson in this because it's very difficult for him to find a niche to come back from. And as you say, it's pretty universal from The Guardian to The Express, people saying it was a job well done. And
even the DUP haven't come out in outrage so far. They've been very cautious. But, I mean, if they weren't happy, they wouldn't have been short in coming forward, would they?
Absolutely. They're certainly not shy about saying no. So what they've done is just come out with a fairly neutral stance, which I think is the pragmatic and sensible thing for them to do. And let's hope that ultimately it does lead to a return to power sharing in Northern Ireland, and we can draw a line under this whole issue of the Northern Ireland Protocol and get on with governing the country.
All of them, Sunak, the DUP, whoever it happens to be, they will be swayed by business and what business think of all of this. What is business saying?
I think it's universally been welcomed by business, because that was the key issue with the former deal, was that the paperwork and the bureaucracy to trade between Northern Ireland and Great Britain was just burdensome, and this has removed some of that. There's an opportunity now also for closer links between the UK and the European Union on other areas of trade, for example, electric vehicles and other areas of growth that may come about in the future. So overall, I think it's a good deal for the business community.
Explain the electric vehicles to me. What's that about?
So at the minute, Eamon, the way it works is there's a rules of origin issue, which means that it's quite technical, but if there's 60% of a car is made elsewhere, then it has to have tariffs on it. Now, for electric cars, a battery is 60-70% from the off, so that's going to be very difficult for the UK to deliver without tariffs. But hopefully this deal negates some of that and we're able to find a breakthrough.
OK, so look, we haven't mentioned Boris yet, but the fact is he's been silent so far, which in itself speaks volumes. Lots of people saying that yesterday was the biggest day of Rishi Sunak's career so far. Could it be so good that actually we could start talking about whether or not the May elections are going to be as bad as forecast, and perhaps even next year's general election might not be a write-off now?
Yeah, I mean, look, Rishi Sunak has been in post since October, and when we look at his record, it's actually been quite remarkable. He saw off the economic turmoil after the Liz Truss mini-budget. He ultimately saw off Nicola Sturgeon and potentially the idea of separatism in Scotland, and now he's renegotiated this Brexit deal. So that's three really important points that he's been able to deliver on. The problem is, Isabel, whether or not the public see this stuff, because it is quite technical, the Northern Ireland Protocol, etc.
What they will see is that the Conservative Party have pretty much united behind this, and whilst for weeks we've had headlines about infighting and civil war within the Tory party, which can't be good for them at the polls, this has got to be something that the public will notice, if not perhaps the technicalities of the Northern Ireland trade terms.
Indeed, yeah, and I think they're going to look at this and think, OK, this is a Prime Minister that can get things done, that can strike a deal where others potentially haven't been able to. So this gives Rishi Sunak a bit of momentum, it gives him a bit of support in Parliament as well to be able to implement his plan for the country.
The thing that gets me, though, is they give it they take the Northern Ireland bit out of it and they make it all about Britain, and it's called the Windsor Framework, and then the King is involved in all of this as well. I don't know really where all of this comes about, but Sunak has been able to make this a Brexit agreement as opposed to anything really to do with Northern Ireland.
Yeah, and I think that's for that reason, which is to get the Brexiteers in the UK understanding that this is important. He was wrapping up this deal in patriotic terms that would appeal to lots of people in the UK, in Great Britain. And I think, you know, calling it the Windsor Agreement, getting the King involved, talking about patriotic goods and trees and nature and all the rest of it, I think he's trying to play to that core.
But who do you think asked for this audience? Because the Times this morning talking about the puzzle, because all three are denying it, the King, Downing Street and the European Commission.
Well, the direction comes from Downing Street. The King's not going to do it on his own accord, and the European Commission aren't going to request something like that. So it does come from Downing Street. But it isn't rare that foreign dignitaries come over here and they get the red carpet and they get to meet the royals. You know, it's part and parcel of diplomacy, part of our arsenal that we've got in the UK. So I don't think it's entirely rare, but it does seem a little bit strange that the King is involved in this. Brexit is still very contentious, and I think to bring the King into it, slightly risky move.